I'm Jay, owner of Volunteer Audio in Oliver Springs, Tennessee, and with me today I've got Tall from Traveling Tall's YouTube channel. I've also got Daryl. Daryl won our Hertz Stage 4 amp speaker giveaway at the Run to the Hills 2. I always want to say Run for the Hills. Run to the Hills 2 at Bootlegger Harley Davidson in Knoxville, Tennessee. So Tall put on this event. It was an amazing event, and you need to take the time and go and get ready. When the third one comes out, you got to make a trip to Knoxville. You got to go on the ride. You got to come see us. But Daryl looked up and he won our Hertz Stage 4 amp speaker package. So this is the same amplifier and speakers that are in Tall's bike. So we're going to do our full plug-and-play Hertz HMP 4D. It's a 600-watt amp. We're going to upgrade his front speakers with the SX165 Neos from Hertz. Same thing in the tour pack. We're going to change out the grills, get all this took care of. We're going to flash the radio so it sounds great, and make sure that Daryl has an amazing system. Probably give away another one at the next event, so definitely be there, and maybe you can win too. You got anything you want to say?
No, I think you've handled everything. First of all, again, I want to thank Jay for participating in the giveaway, well, hosting the giveaway, putting on the giveaway at Run to the Hills 2. And Daryl is the lucky winner of it. And listen, guys, this could not be going on a more beautiful bike. This black and blue Ultra is a beautiful motorcycle. It's a 2022, right, Daryl?
That's right.
Yeah, it's a fantastic looking bike. But now we're about to take care of something that is just, I don't want to say it's a flaw, but it's a huge upgrade. When Jay gets a hold of this thing and he puts the new radio in it, I think you're going to be really pleased with it.
Yeah, I think we're going to take it from you can barely hear it at highway speeds to you've got more than you need, which, you know, a 600-watt amp, a lot of people say you need 800 watts, you need 1200 watts. You hear this stuff all the time. When it's loud enough that you can hear it over the wind in the engine at 85 plus miles an hour, I believe we've succeeded. That's what our plan is today. We're going to get this put in place. It's a 2022. We know it's under warranty. We're not going to cut a single wire. We're not going to do anything to void that Harley warranty, and we're going to make it amazing. Right. I want to also give a shout out to Hertz. So Hertz helped sponsor this. They supplied us the equipment we needed for the giveaway. We're doing the labor, and we've all come together to make sure that Daryl gets a blessing. So hang out and watch the video as we take this bike apart and we get all of it installed. All right, first I'm going to take the fairing off so we can get access to where we're going to put our amp and to get to where we can change the speakers. On this bike we have these marker lights. We're going to turn those each to the side just for clearance of the fairing as we remove it. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the upper windshield bolts. We're going to do the two outer bolts first, take those all the way out. Now as I remove our bolts, I've got some trays that we organize all of these in. And that way at the end, when all the bolts are out of the tray, we know we're done and we didn't forget putting anything back in place. All right, we've got our fender protector in place to make sure if we drop anything that we don't damage our fender. We're going to leave this upper bolt in place and we're going to pull our windshield off of our fairing here. All right, so we have 4 bolts on this side we're going to take out. There are 2 T25 Torx bolts here at the top, basically about where the mirrors are on each side. They're going to be longer than the ones at the bottom that we're fixing to remove. So down here at the bottom, there's another one. It's a shorter one. So when you go back together, keep in mind the longer one goes at the top, the shorter one at the bottom. We're going to fully remove these 4 bolts because the one at the windshield is keeping our fairing from falling off. All right, so now that we have those 4 bolts out, this bolt is just kind of sitting in here holding it in place. Just lift your fairing up and out. Work it around those lights and unplug your headlight. All right, now that we've exposed the back of the radio and the speaker area, we're going to go ahead and remove the 2 bolts holding this vent in place. There's one on each side. They're a T25 Torx also. All right, at this point, we're going to start undoing all the wiring around the top and get that out of the way because the next step, we're going to remove this tray that's bolted to the top of the radio. Okay, I'm going to use a small screwdriver just to go underneath the clips and pry up to make sure that we don't just pull with a lot of force to get these undone. You're going to be real careful when you go back together that you take these plugins and you go in straight so you don't bend any of the pins inside the gauges. You're reusing the factory radios, so we're going to leave our GPS antenna up here mounted on the plate, but I'm going to go ahead and disconnect it for now so that we can take it off with the plate. It's just a small push clip on the bottom of the connector at the back of the radio. And now it's free to stay there where it was. And we're going to unclip these additional harnesses. These are expansion harnesses for things like the wireless headset interface module and such that Harley includes. Normally you would have a backbone harness here also, but this having a factory tour pack, there's no backbone harness up here on the fairing. All right, so we're gonna have some Allen heads on the outside going into our speaker pods we're gonna remove. We'll also have another one here on the back holding our storage compartment, one on each side of the speedometer cluster, and then 4 going into the top of the radio. We'll go ahead and remove those now. Again, as you do this, kind of lay them out so you know the order in which you took them out. I like these little plastic trays, but if you don't have that, just kind of organize it on your bench. Now I'm saying this like you're doing this because Volunteer Audio sells do-it-yourself packages just like we're installing today. They come completely pre-wired. All the gains and filters are preset on the amp. So we make this very much so easy for you to do yourself. If you think you're mechanically inclined enough to do what you see I'm doing, then I've got a package set up to make this very easy. And even all the way down to flashing the radio, which we're going to do later. If you don't have a local dealer that can do that, we do rent the flash tool at volunteeraudio.com so you can do it yourself. So just going around removing, I've got the Allen heads out and I'm doing the 2 at the speedometer cluster. At this point, we have the one going to the back of the storage pocket. I'm going to take it out. And then we've got the 4 going into the top of the stock radio. All right, at this point, our tray is loose. We can take it off and set it to the side. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pull the radio out next, but to do that, I've gotta take the speedometer cluster the rest of the way out. So we have one more bolt going into the top of it. We'll remove that and set this to the side as well. All right, so back to these connectors. The main radio plug has a little button that you push in and then you rotate a lever that's gonna unplug it. That keeps it very secure from all the vibration. The factory USB has a button just right on the top that you push to release it. And then the antenna has one on the bottom, kind of hidden. You're gonna push up on that to release the factory antenna. Now we've only got 4 3/16 bolts holding our radio in, and we're gonna have it removed. Now the reason I'm removing the radio, even though we're keeping it, is to give you a better access to the 3 bolts on each side to hold the speaker pods in place. So I've got an 11 millimeter on a wobble that makes that very easy for me to do without removing the radio. But most people do not have this exact tool in their garage. So I'm going to show you a different way today to try to save you some trouble. All right, I told you a minute ago I was going to be removing the radio to give you better access to the bolts holding the speaker pods in. Now, the next step after you get the radio out is actually to take the clips out of this little black plastic tray. They're just 2 Phillips-headed clips, and they're a push clip, but if you turn it, it's going to allow you to release that clip and pull it out. And there's one on each side. All right, now that I have those bolts undone, I'm going to go ahead and unsnap this main harness from each side. All right, so once that harness is loose, we're going to undo our speaker pod harness as well. Now this tray will slide toward where the headlight was. So just easily work it around, get your wires to come with it, and slide it out of your way. As this slides forward, it actually opens up an area here for you to get to do the bolts related to these speaker pods. I'm trying to plug that one back up later. So this one had one extra connector here that came unplugged. Definitely pay attention as you're doing this because anything that comes unplugged is going to have to be replugged up at a later time. All right, so I've got that down to where we can access these bolts, and I'm going to start by removing those 3 bolts on each side before we take the pod bolts on the outside off. All right, so I've got a Milwaukee battery ratchet just to kind of save some time, and an 11mm socket. And you'll notice there are 3 bolts. That's our first one, which is the lower bolt. There's an upper one here. And then there's one toward the very inner edge. A little bit more difficult to get to, but still easier this way. Let's see if I can get it lined up right. All right, so that's much easier than the way that a lot of people are trying to do it up through from underneath. Now, so this pod has been disconnected from that. I've unplugged our speaker connection. Now there's only 3/16 Allen heads around the perimeter. I'm gonna go ahead and remove those. All right, so now that those are off, your pod's simply gonna come off. We're gonna set it to the side. We'll change the speakers out here in a minute. All right, let's repeat that process on the other side. There's 2 of them. All right, same process. I'm gonna go ahead and unplug though our speaker wires from the pod, as well as the connection for the cigarette lighter. All right, so let's take this pod off and we'll move over and change these speakers out now. Pods here, and our Hertz speakers are gonna drop directly back in place with nothing modified. So all you're gonna do is remove those 4 original Torx bolts that hold the speaker in place. Now save them because we're gonna reuse them here shortly. All right, so take those 4 screws out, then the speaker's just gonna lift out. Now on the back, we're gonna have 2 speaker connections. The clear or white connector, the smaller one is actually our positive terminal. So I'm gonna unplug it. The larger black connector is our negative. I say that because we need to put it in the correct place on our new speaker. So take a pair of pliers and slightly close these up so you get a better connection. We definitely don't want them to come loose later and have to pull our pods back off because the speaker came unplugged. Now here's our Hertz speaker. You're going to notice that it has the positive and negative marked on the back. So the clear one is going to go to the positive. And then the black one to the negative. Now once you get them on there, kind of give them a little bit of a tug and make sure they don't try to easily come back undone. Now I'm a little OCD, so I'm going to swap these speakers around so the logos are facing the right way. We're using the factory grills, so most likely it's going to be hard to see that if you do I want it going correctly. All right, so I just had a great question by Traveling Tall here. So Tall asked, he said, so what makes that Hertz speaker so much better than the stock speaker, and which one was in my bike? So we're kind of reminiscing on when we did his upgrade. So the same speaker that was in Daryl's bike, this small 5 1/4 speaker is the same speaker that was in Tall's bike also. So that is what is in this. Now if you were to go up to a Boom Stage 1, you're going to see that it moves up to a 6.5-inch sized speaker, and it's got a little separate tweeter to the side. If you go to Boom 2, you actually get a solid woofer, you get a separate midden tweeter in front of it, and these two systems normally are going to have an amplifier associated with them. But back to the question, what makes the Hertz speaker so much better? I mean, it's quite a bit more expensive than a cheap speaker, and what material makes them louder? Well, one good way of kind of showing you is, let's see if I can show you this. This is a metal wall. Speakers are a voice coil, which is a copper wound piece of wire that sits in a magnetic gap. So the magnet actually makes this speaker function. And the stronger that speaker is, the more control it has and the more efficient seemingly the speaker is. So a lot of times people look at a speaker, and if it's got a bigger magnet, they go, whoa, that's got to be a better speaker. Well, if you notice, on this metal wall, I have no magnetic properties seemingly at all on the stock speaker. Now we take our Hertz speaker, and it's connecting to the wall. I mean, it's kind of hard to pull off. It would actually hang here, where the factory speaker won't at all. So first off, we have a much bigger, stronger magnet. It's neodymium, which is the strongest magnet. It's about 40 times stronger than strontium, and that's what Harley uses, but it's just so small that you can't even see that it has a magnetic field around it. It doesn't hook to anything. Now, when they went up and they upgraded, same problem. Boom 1, Boom 2, magnet's still not big enough. These magnets actually take the heat from the electrical current, and they'll get very, very hot to the touch, especially when they're small. The bigger they are, the better they're going to dissipate that heat. The more efficient this speaker is going to be, meaning it's going to be louder off less power. One great thing about this speaker that I'm told by the guys at Hertz, this speaker does 90% of its output with 50% of its rated power. Meaning, even though it's a 100 watt RMS speaker, if you send 50 watts to it, it's still doing 90% of what it's capable of. The factory speaker is nowhere near that efficient. So just doing a direct replacement with a stock radio, these are going to be clearer. They're going to go a little louder than the stock speaker does. Adding the amplifier like we're doing in Daryl's, it's going to bring it to a whole nother level and make it where we can hear it over the bike, the exhaust, the wind, and make it where we can hear it while we ride. But just want to take a second to kind of tell you the difference in it. The neodymium is the most important part. Now Hertz also is using a lighter, stiffer cone that's treated to be waterproof and has a gasket around the center. And if you notice, our tweeter is actually substantially larger too. So more surface area from a true 6.5, more surface area on the tweeter, better materials. It's going to make it more efficient. It's going to make it louder. It's going to give us that result we're looking for. All right, let's continue putting the speaker back in. Go ahead and start all 4 of your bolts before you tighten any of them down. This just makes it a little bit easier. You don't have to loosen them back up because something's not lined up. The factory pods have a little ear that sticks out. It's just an alignment pin that makes sure the speaker goes where it's supposed to. Hertz's give you a spot on the speaker for that to line up. So you don't even have to cut that ear off like you do with some of the other brand speakers. Now, at Volunteer Audio at my company, we only sell motorcycle speakers for motorcycles. A lot of other places want to use a car speaker that's been kind of adapted to it, but every offering that we have has a neodymium magnet that's going to be more powerful. It's going to fit without modification. We don't want to send you something that you have to cut your bike up to make it work. So first speaker down, let's go ahead and pull our second one out and get it installed. All right, now repeat the same step as before. Unplug the speaker. I'm going to tighten up these terminals so they don't come loose later. Black connector goes to negative. Clear connector goes to positive. All right. Now as they're all started, I'm just going to tighten them up. We're fixing to head back to the bike and mount these back in place. So after we get these mounted, next we're going to pull our gas tank off and get ready to mount our wiring for our amplifier. All right, so we're going to take our speaker pod, we're going to put it on just like we removed it. Now Daryl's opted to keep his factory grills on this particular bike. They're really nice. They're the metal grills with the Harley logo in them, and I don't blame him at all. But if you did have the older style grills, a lot of them had a paper kind of cloth on them on the outside, and that particular grill really shows age very, very quickly. So we do sell the Hertz logoed metal grills that look very similar to what's in this bike that you could add on. All right, so now those are tight. I'm going to hand start or finger start these 3 bolts in this lower pod before we tighten any of them. All right, so now that those are started, we'll grab our tool, tighten them back up. So it had 3 in it when we started. It's going to have 3 back in it when we finish. Now, many bikes that I come after someone else's install are missing these bolts. It's really important because this whole fairing's rigidity is based off this pod being properly mounted. So we're going to make sure they're all back in. All right, so we'll repeat the same process on this side. All right, same process again. We're just going to use our fingers and start these bolts first. You don't want to just try to send them in with a tool because you may cross thread them. If you tighten one of them before you line up the others, they may not line up. So these can be a little difficult to see what you're doing. All right, so we've got our pods back firmly mounted. All the bolts are back in place. Now we're going to feed this tray back here above the forks. Get all this wiring back where it was. Now at the back here, there's 2 little metal tabs that some ears on this plastic plate line up with. If you get those lined up, it'll slide all the way in. So both sides are all the way in. Now I can just reinstall our little push clips. All right, so next step, we're gonna go ahead and drop the radio back in, put our plate on, get all this wiring back where it goes, so we'll be ready to put our amp in. right, so I'm gonna go ahead and plug our antenna back in. At this point, I'm not gonna plug in the GPS antenna yet because it's on the plate. We could go ahead and put our USB back, but the main radio plug, we're gonna wait because our amplifier just plugs in there. It's a T-harness in. Let's go ahead and put our gauges back in. All right, now let's get our plate just fished back in where it used to be. I'll start with the ones that go into the top of the radio. There's a lot less play there for where they'll go, so if you start those first, you're going to make sure they line up in the end. It's a little bit of adjustment on all the other locations. All right, so let's do our perimeter bolts now. I'm going to put our 2 gauge bolts in first, so the one on each side at the bottom. They're a black Torx bolt. Now we have our 4 Allen head bolts. I'm using my T25 to install them because it's roughly the same size. I'm going to get those started first. These pods have a little bit of play in them, so if they're not lining up, you can just grab that pod and kind of pull out on it. In this case, ours are lining right back up. All right, so let's start putting our wiring back where it was. We're gonna fish it all the way up through here and go ahead and get it plugged into all of our gauges. We're gonna go ahead and plug in our front speaker wires. So the way this amplifier goes in, because it T-harnesses behind the radio, all factory wiring being used, it's gonna feed them right through that original speaker connection. There's our GPS antenna. I'm going to go ahead and plug it back in so we don't forget later. Plug our front speaker harness back in and also our front cigarette lighter. All right, so kind of the hardest part of the front is done. Let's move over and get our gas tank off so we can get our amp mounted and get our wiring ran back under the gas tank to the battery. All right, so first we've got to get our seat off. Now this having a tour pack, it's easier just to open up your tour pack lid, and that's going to give you access to your bolt. In this case, it's just a Phillips headed bolt. We'll remove that. We're also going to open up one of the bags and release one of the Phillips bolts that's holding this leather strap in place. Once you get that off, just lay that strap to the side. Now at this point, the seat's just going to slide back to come undone. All right. Now I'm always looking to see, is there any heated gear wiring or was there any connections on the seat due to maybe an adjustable backrest? So always come up slowly, look for those plugs because you definitely don't want to rip anything out of place. Let's move on and get our gas tank undone. I'm going to throw some gloves on because at the end I may get a little bit of gas on my hands. All right, so first we're going to have a vent that runs down the side of the frame here. It's normally connected with a zip tie. Normally it's loose enough that you can fish it out. Sometimes you actually have to cut this zip tie to get it out. This time it's just going to pull out for us. So this is kind of an overflow for the gas tank if it were overfilled and built too much pressure. So when we go back together, definitely secure it back inside that frame. We don't want that hanging down on the exhaust or getting to the exhaust. We also have a fuel return line here. We're going to have to unplug. Then we've got a couple connections here related to the fuel sending unit. Unplug our first connector, which is this white one, and then there's also a black connector underneath. All right, so now that everything is disconnected, we're going to remove our bolts and disconnect our fuel line after that. All right, so there's going to be two 13 millimeters at the base of the gas tank. About how much gas is in here, Daryl?
A little less than half.
Oh, good deal. Full tank is very hard to lift on your own, so I'd recommend having a half tank or less when you do this job. So on the front, there's going to be two rubber covers, one on each side. At the front bolts, just pull those off, and then take that 13 millimeter bolt out. Actually, come from this angle. All right, so the fuel line is very easy to disconnect if you don't forget to do it. There's a little chrome sleeve here that you just lift up on and then pull the bottom out. At the same time that it disconnects, it also shuts the fuel off, so you don't have to worry about it continuing to run out. All right, so the reason we took the gas tank off, as you've seen, it's just a few easy steps to get it out of our way, but this is the correct place to run any wiring going to the back of the bike from the front. This is what we call the backbone, and once you remove this cover, you'll see that's where Harley runs all their wiring. We want to do it just like they did. Some people want to run the wiring up beside the gas tank or underneath here. It's just going to fall, it's going to rub the motor, it's going to look bad. It's not the right way. So very easy, just a couple steps here to get this off. We're going to see there's some factory tape that's wrapped around. You will need to cut that tape on both sides, as well as release these brake lines out of your way. They're not really hard to deal with, but you definitely want to get those disconnected too. So cut the tape, pop this off, and we'll see the wiring underneath. I'm just using a little straight screwdriver just to release the clips versus just pulling really hard. We definitely don't want to break or mess up any ABS lines. Now I'll take my knife and I'll cut this tape on both sides. The tape doesn't actually hold it on now, but I think it was part of like the assembly line process, that when they would have set this on the bike originally, it was already taped. So again, I'm going to take a small straight screwdriver. It's going to go in beside each one of these clips, just pry out to release them. There's 4 across the front, and then you just follow them just down the side on each side. All right, so now that I have the front up, I'm just going to follow down, making sure I get my tape disconnected where we've cut it. This line of tape is there's actually a set of clips. So by the time you're watching this video, we've already got another video series we did. We met a guy at the Traveling Tall's event here at Bootlegger that has a channel called Riding and Wrenching. And I would ask you to check out Riding and Wrenching on YouTube and watch the video, because we did a full step-by-step build on his bike as well using the Precision Power products. So if you like what you see here, if you want to see it again, see a different version of it, we should already have that posted by now. All right, so we have that backbone completely, that cover completely disconnected now and off, so we've exposed all those wires. So don't get scared. We're not going to do anything with these. All we're going to do is run some additional ones back to the battery. So let's move back to the front. We'll mount our amplifier and then we'll fish those wires back. So we're going to prep this area for our amplifier. So the amp we're installing is the Hertz HMP4D. It's a 600 watt amp, and we're going to put it right here on this metal plate. This is where the factory boom amp would go, and many other manufacturers have chose to put their amp there too. It's just unused space that we can use. We're going to clean this with some isopropyl rubbing alcohol just to make sure that our Velcro that's going to hold our amp in place gets a really good stick. All right, so if you've ordered a stage kit from us, which is one of our kits that comes with the amp and the speakers, it's going to come like this. Everything's already wired, everything's already wrapped, so it makes it very, very simple. All the way down to if you order it for a Street Glide, it's going to come with the Velcro already on it. So it's as simple as just peeling the backing off and then sticking it in the right location. And we're in place. Now there's a cap on the end. It has all of our adjustments, our gain settings, our filter settings. They're already preset, so no need to get in there. You don't need a digital distortion detector, an oscilloscope, or any fancy tools to set the gains. I've already done that work for you before it shipped. All right, so back to our wiring. So we didn't plug our radio in earlier for a reason. I'm going to show you why here. So this is our amplifier connection. We're actually going to use it. It has the same connection the factory radio plug had. We're going to plug it into the radio. Now, once we've done that, on the other side, we have the connection for the original factory radio plug. All right, so this is our T-harness, and I'm going to feed this wiring just right up here next to this pocket, up in beside the amp. Here in a little while, I'll take some zip ties, and I'll secure it in here to make sure that it doesn't work its way back out, because you've got to make room for this wiring somewhere so that eventually we can put this fairing back on. All right, well, I'm going to leave that there for now because I'm going to secure it here at the end once we get everything else plugged in. Now, next step, because we're using a factory radio, we have to have a way to turn on the amplifier. So we've added in here an accessory connector for you. It can go on either side of the fairing. You're going to notice there's one down here at the bottom of the right pod, but there's also one here right up at the top that has a factory block off in it. So you're going to plug in the cord that we send you into it, take the block off, and just plug it into the other connector. Now we added the second connector in case you have some custom dynamics lights or something you've added on that need to plug in here. This is a great place for that, and we didn't want to take that away. So very, very simple. Plug into the radio connector, plug into the accessory port. Everything is done now except for just to route this power and ground back to the battery. So we're going to do that now. All you do is fish it with the original wiring that runs right down through here. Just follow right through the fairing. Pull it out on the other side. Now we're going to bring that into the backbone of the bike, and at the end we'll zip tie all of this up and secure it. All right, so we've got this power wire that's already pre-attached to the amp. We're routed up here. We're just going to drop it into the backbone. Now I normally just kind of push this wire over enough to fit this beside it. It's just going to make it easier to put our cap on at the end if we've made room for this new larger wire. Now our kit comes with oxygen-free power and ground wire already connected that runs all the way back to the battery. Fuse holder is already installed, so here in a second we just have to connect it to the terminals. Let's put that cover back on now. So as you do this, keep in mind and pay attention to the factory wiring, making sure that nothing is decided to try to hang out the side of this. If so, just kind of push it back into its trough and get it snapped back in. I'll lift these pieces of tape back over where they were. Put our brake lines back in place. All right, so all the lines are back where they go. Nothing's in the way of putting our gas tank back on. Everything's snapped in, so I'm going to grab the tank and go and put it back on. All right, tank's back in place. We'll grab our bolts, start going back together with that. All right, again, there's 4 bolts. We're going to go and start the ones at the back, but don't tighten them all the way up yet. They're slotted so the tank can move, so get your front ones lined up and then where they go first. before you tighten anything down. All right, let's get the back two tightened up, and then we're going to install those little rubber covers. Always trying to go back in the order that you came off with. So I've got the little rubber caps going back to cover the front bolts. Now sometimes these are already missing. It's not much that holds them on, just kind of pressure. All right, let's plug all of our connections back up. So I'm going to connect our vent and our overflow. We're going to go ahead and fish it back where it goes. Now I'm not going to plug in the other connections quite yet because we're fixing to have to access the battery. Like I said earlier, just go ahead and make sure that you resecure this line and add a zip tie to it so that it's not on that exhaust. Definitely don't want a fuel line on the exhaust. It's just going to end up being trouble. All right, so next we're going to go ahead and remove the cover off the top of the battery. It's got a little bit of added lighting here, or a lighting controller. We're going to set it to the side. Disconnect any of the plugs on top. All right, so we're just taking our connections loose that are on top of this cover that's over top of the battery. Just slide each one of our plugs out of the retainers. Now this is the computer for the bike. Let's go ahead and lift it out. Kind of set it up, make sure it's loose. All right, so the same tool we just used to take our gas tank bolts out are going to take the two bolts out at the base of the battery tray. That's a 13 millimeter. Now this tray is just going to come forward and should lift off the front of the battery and get out of our way. Got a few cords in the way that we're just fishing around here. All right, so it's loose. And now we have access to our battery terminals. It's very simple. All you need is a Phillips screwdriver to get to the battery connections on a Harley. And you'll see we have two connections. We have a ground connection, which is going to be a gray or black. We have a red to go to battery positive, and our fuse is already installed in this weather-tight motorcycle fuse holder. Now, a lot of guys ask me, do I need a lithium battery? Do I need to upgrade my battery for my audio system? This particular amp we're using today pulls about 20 amps of current at full power. So definitely within the charging and battery requirements of the bike, no need to have to upgrade to put this system in. Now, if you do a lithium battery, you're gonna get a lot more playtime if you like to sit around with the engine not running, listening to music. But definitely not required. All right, so our power is connected, our ground is connected. Now we're going to take this excess wire in this fuse holder. I want you to put it just right up here in front of the battery area. It's going to fit right in here and get out of sight and out of the way for us to reinstall that battery cover. Let's go back on with our battery tray now. Put our two bolts back in. All right, so now we're going to reinstall and reconnect the connections from the fuel tank that we had disconnected earlier. So let's do that as we're going. Computer back where it was. All right. All right, so now everything that we disconnected is back where it was. Battery is back connected to our amp, and we're ready to put our seat back on. I'm going to leave it off temporarily just so you get maybe a better view of us doing these back speakers. All right, so we're going to remove our rear tour pack speakers. To do this, we need a Torx T10. We're going to remove this hardware, but we're not going to be reusing the original screws from Harley, and I'll go over why here in just a minute. We are going to reuse the original grills. Daryl wants it to have a very factory look when we're done. You won't be able to tell we've done anything until you listen to it. All right, so we're going to go and take this factory speaker out. This is the same speaker we saw on the front. A little different on the terminal though. We're going to have a larger gold terminal for our negative, and we're going to have a smaller silver terminal for our positive. So remember that when we go back together with our new speaker. Same steps as earlier, as we're going to tighten these up a little bit to make sure they don't come unplugged later. Large gold terminal to negative. Smaller silver one to positive. All right, now we're just going to drop our speaker in place. Actually, let me take that second and talk about what I was going to talk about. So there are these 4 rubber grommets that held the original speaker in. As the bolt tightened into them, they just swelled. There's actually no threads there, nothing there that really holds it in place. And these are just a push fit or pressure fit in grommet. If you put your new speaker in those, you run the chance that because of the higher output and the vibration the new speaker does, that these pull out. You're riding down the road, we're very familiar with people losing their bags while riding. I've had a couple guys actually lose speakers while riding as well. So we don't reuse the original hardware. We're going to clock it just slightly to the side, and we're going to use the screws that come with the speaker and go straight into the plastic. By doing that, we haven't had any speakers come out and nothing come loose in the future. All right, so we're just going to take our factory grill, drop it over. We've rotated it just enough that we're going into the plastic of the tour pack pod instead of that grommet. Now we're not going to put a lot of force on this with our drill because we definitely don't want to strip it out. All right, so it's back to a factory look, but we've got our new speaker in place. Let's go and do the same thing on the other side. Just removing those T10 Torx bolts. Say we're not going to reuse those for the reasons we just talked about. We are going to be reusing the grill. All right, these are on a little bit tighter. The silver one is the positive, the large gold one's the negative. Just in case you fast forwarded to this part to see how to do your install. We do offer some metal grills that we use sometimes to actually go in the back, especially if your factory grills are older and they've got some wear on them. We've got some Hertz logoed grills that match the front pretty good. So you're going to rotate this speaker around to where your speaker terminals clear the bolts that are inside the pod. There we go, it's going to clear there. All right, both of our rear speakers are installed. I'm going to go ahead and put our seat back on because we don't need to leave it off. Next, we're going to go ahead and flash our radio, then we'll test it and put our fairing back together. All right, so put our bolt back in. Don't forget your leather strap. All right, so very quickly, we've just about knocked out an entire install. And I'm getting a little bit more excited. I assume Daryl's getting there too, because we're not far from getting to hear this. So while we've got our lid open, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this bag. I'm gonna do that so that we can take the side panel off and flash the radio. All right, so let me bring you up to speed. We've removed the bag and the side panel down here at the fuse panel. We did that so we could get access to the data port where you're going to plug in to flash your radio. If this was a 14 to 20 model, this would be a gray connector in the bottom of the box in the same position. On 21 and newer, it's going to be red in color. And so we've plugged into that. We've got our laptop connected. We've got our ignition turned on, and we're logged in and signed in to our program here. This is a Techno Research Programmer. Now, a lot of people they've got a lot of misconceptions. They think that there are a whole bunch of different flashes and there's a lot of information out there leading you to do different ones. All the flashes out there, whether it says Kicker or Rockford or Sounds or one of those many, many names that people are going to talk about, are all a factory flash. They're one of the Boom Audio flashes, and they've just put their name to it so that they can easily tell you which one to use. Now, what we're going to use is a default Boom flash. And we're going to pick the 6-speaker, upper fairing, lower fairing, saddlebag, 2-amp setup. We do that because it does all the things I told you earlier. It's going to attenuate the radio, turn on the rear speakers, fix our EQ, and make it where it doesn't change while running. And it does that all in one flash. Because we know all the parameters of this flash, we set up all of our amps to this flash. So if you do this, our plug-and-play amp will be perfectly set up. Once we've selected the correct one, we're just going to click this hand. It's going to say connecting to the bike. All right, so we're connected again. It tells us that we are setting. When this says pass, the actual radio has been flashed. We may have to try this again. Well, we're going to let it do its thing because it's still working on it. All right, so we passed. So our radio's flashed. We're just going to cycle our ignition off. You're supposed to do that and wait 13 seconds. That's what it tells you here on screen. We're going to cycle our ignition back on. Now, Daryl, do you have an Apple phone or Android phone?
Android.
Okay, so it doesn't do anything for you if I turn on your Apple CarPlay. No. All right, so I'm going to talk about it. We're not going to actually do it. So once you flashed it, you can go up here to the speaker configuration, go to audio outputs and nav. And if you go here and you just click and turn on the WIM, you'll see it says right next to it CarPlay. That activates the Apple CarPlay without a WIM installed in the bike. So it's just kind of a workaround. You don't have to install a jumper, and your CarPlay would work just by turning that on. Now, Daryl's got an Android phone, so we're not going to turn it on while we're here. All right, we've got the bike flashed. Let's get the side panel and the bag on, and we'll test it and finish putting it together. All right, so amplifier is in place, put it there earlier, but now all the wiring is actually tidied up. I zip tied it up where it's clean, where it's not gonna get in the way of the fairing. All we gotta do is connect our headlight, put the fairing on after we put this vent back in place. All right, so we've got our fairing. We're gonna drop it back in place down here between these lights. Make sure you plug your headlight back in. And then use that top bolt, just kind of guide this back into place. And I'm gonna go ahead and start putting the inner fairing bolts back in. I'm gonna put the longer ones up here at the headlight. I'm sorry, not headlight, at the mirrors. I want to get these lined up first. It's going to make everything else go better. There we go, finally got it lined up. I'll start the lower ones. Now I'm not going to tighten any of these yet until we get our windshield in place. All right, so all of those are started. And once I get the windshield in, I'm going to put a couple turns on the middle bolt and then we'll line up these two outside ones. So our tray is empty of bolts. We only have the two for the outside of the windshield, which means we're doing pretty good. We're almost done. Here in a second, we'll see if we can't get the first reaction from Daryl as he gets to hear it for the first time. Now we're going to take it up the road. We're going to take it to a parking lot so we can get a good sound of it outside. Sometimes it's hard to accurately get that sound inside of this garage. If I can keep from dropping these bolts. Actually, I think I'm going to pull this in a little further. All right, so now that they're all started, I'm going to go ahead and tighten these inner fairing bolts all the way up. All right, one final check. And all of our bolts are back in. All our bolts are tight. We're gonna straighten up our lights. So we're gonna take our fender protector off, we're gonna get it out, and we'll pick back up in a parking lot and we'll do our first listen to it. We'll let Daryl hear this for the first time, and well, let's see if we can get his reaction.
Come a little closer, Dale.
be able to hear it maybe all the way in Kentucky?
I think I can hear it.
All right, so I'm going to change up tracks. We're going to go to another one that's just a little bit longer to make sure that we have plenty of time to fit it in.
Okay.
And let's get set up to our walkaway.
All right.
Smaller, but the audio is still right where it was. Everybody in the neighborhood is going to know Daryl got a new radio. I think there's a YouTuber I watch. He talked about having a block party with one of these systems. All right, just a quick recap. This is just a pair of Hertz SX165 Neos front and rear and a 600 watt Hertz amplifier. It sounds absolutely amazing, even right at 200 feet away. So I think you get the idea. It's real hard to show how the quality of this is inside of a building. We've got to get out here where we've got enough room to really stretch it out. His bike is way down there on the other end. You still can hear it. Still sounds very clear. And we're not quite out of parking spaces. We might have ran out of song. All right, so we've had a pretty good day. Just to kind of summarize it all, Daryl drove in from Kentucky, brought us his 2022 Ultra Limited, beautiful bike, and we upgraded it with a Hertz Stage 4 setup. This is one of our volunteer audio packages. It comes with 4 SX165 Neos and a 600 watt Hertz amp. Now we give this away at the Run to the Hills 2 in Knoxville at Bootlegger. It was something that Traveling Tall put on. He's an excellent YouTuber. If you don't follow him, I suggest looking him up and doing it. He does a lot of Harley oriented and motorcycle oriented videos that we find very interesting to watch, and I think you would too. But I just want to say thanks to Daryl again, thanks to Hertz for sponsoring our giveaway, and I appreciate all the time you spent with us today, all the scenes you've let us set up and do. We did the walk away in the parking lot. I think it turned out well. We did a little drive-by scene, and just wanted to wrap it up and let you know that everything went well. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching Volunteer Audio's YouTube channel. Thank you for watching Traveling Tall. If that's how you found us, please like this video. If you want to see more of them, please subscribe to us. Comment below if you have questions about this system or what we may be able to do to your bike, or if you want to do it yourself. We've got plenty of step-by-step videos walking you all the way through, just like the way we did this one today. Please reach out to us at 1-844-30-AUDIO if you want to call and talk to somebody. You can also email us at sales@volaudio.com or just visit www.volunteeraudio.com. We're very quick to respond to messages, so you can definitely just comment below and I'll reach back out to you and answer any questions you have. Thank you so much for watching, and God bless.